Good afternoon. My name is Christopher. Welcome to my channel once again. I welcome you to a second session of my video. I'm going to call this Sustainable Development Laws, Principles and Practices. Of course, we still continue talking about key essentials, the Sustainable Development Goals and the law. So this is where I just want to continue talking about the interrelated laws, policies, treaties, protocols, declarations, agreements that have been made between countries, most especially member states of the UN and also member states of the UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, and every other consecutive agreements that have been made towards sustainable development goals in these member countries. So I would like us to today talk about a few things. First off, I'll start with rising global social and ecological risks. So as it is known, the world economy faces a series of shocks. Science also warns of intensifying human development pressures and shattering of planetary boundaries, where we've seen that the map that we know, or the continental maps that we know, science is showing that there could be planetary boundaries that may be shifting because of rising developmental and ecological risks that are associated maybe with climate change issues and all those things. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Secondly, I would like to talk about international responses to complex challenges and impacts when it comes to this. So, one, global wicked problems are increasing in severity and impact, but the risks are not truly surprises. Some of these risks and problems that we are finding ourselves into as humans has been talked about. We've been warned by scientists, we've been warned by experts of some of the shocks that we are going through. So they are not really surprises, they are not new things. We know them, but we keep ignoring them, especially people in decision making positions. They've been told, they've been advised what they've been there's been suggestions and recommendations that have been made in order to curb some of these risks and shocks, but they are ignored either on a small scale or a large scale. So they are not really surprises. Two is that the international community has been examining scientific data, raising the alarm and struggling to negotiate responses for over 75 years now, which is like three quarters of a century since the UN was founded. Like I mentioned, there's been talks about it, and it's like a blind eye is paid towards it, so risks keep increasing, which lead to mediation or mitigation about it. Third is that in July 2022, the United Nations General Assembly recognized the right to a clean, health, and sustainable environment as a human right that is related to other rights and existing international laws. So you and me have the right to live in a very clean and healthy environment. But is that the case? In most cases, especially in developing countries, that is like a far-fetched right. Not because people want to live in an unhealthy environment, but because circumstantial, social, economic reasons do not allow citizens to live in a clean, healthy environment. Four is that law can be a sword or it can be a shield. So, in my context, it remains to be seen how sustainability considerations will be addressed by treaty law, international dispute resolutions, and domestic legal and institutional reforms. So, that's some of the things that impacting that are responding to complex challenges and impacts when it comes to sustainable development laws and policies. The third thing I want to talk about is sustainable development on the global agenda. I will cite what the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, saving our planet, lifting people out of poverty, advancing economic growth, these are one and the same fight. You can't do one thing and ignore the other, because sustainable development goals are interrelated. If you are dealing with water, you have to consider electricity or energy issues. If you are dealing with energy issues, you have to consider food security, agriculture, land issues, and so you can't do one thing and forget the other. These are one and the same fight. I agree with him. Well, I would name this a why, because global policy agenda through 2020, 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals are backed by treaties. I have come to realize that these goals did not just come from nowhere. There were talks, there were discussions, there were committee meetings, there were technical working groups that brought about the agreements. One of them is the 17 goals, which are built on Millennium Development Goals, and previous to the Millennium Development Goals were the 1992 to 2012 agenda. Okay, and under these 17 goals, we have 169 targets, measurable with indicators. I think we have over 246 or 64 indicators. I'll be happy to hear the comments. If we know, if we have people in the who are watching this video and they know exactly how many indicators we have. Then there's also a framework to facilitate international cooperation and action linked to many international treaty regimes. B on this global agenda is that global legal principles in international courts and tribunals. There are global legal principles in international courts and tribunals. One of them is that state-to-state dispute settlement advisory opinions are advancing in the International Court of Justice, ICJ, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, the World Trade Organizations. B, state to other disputes are being pursued in regional human rights courts. Other regional courts also dispute complaint mechanisms of international accords organizations, including investment tribunals under the ICSID or UNCIT or UNCITRO rules. So these are some of the global legal principles in international courts that talk about the rules, the precedences, the obligations that state to state are supposed to prioritize at state level to implement and monitor, evaluate the sustainable development goals. The third thing I want to just make mention, I'm making summary to read. I'll be happy to answer any questions towards that. Is that the third thing is integrated responses to global economic, social, and environmental challenges. What are the global economic, social, and environmental challenges that we are facing right now? Globally, it's not about Zambia, it's not about Africa. These are global agenda issues that I'm talking about. So one of the integrated responses is global challenges for the economy. So this talks about inequality, poverty, natural resource depletion, unemployment, lack of infrastructure, faltering trade, investment, financial rules, perverse subsidies, lack of opportunity, and stability. The SDGs in this context are industry, innovation and infrastructure, which is goal number 9, decent work and economic growth, which is SDG number 8, reduced inequality, which is SDG number 10, sustainable consumption and production, one of my favorite, which is SDG number 12, no poverty, SDG 1, zero hunger, SDG 2, affordable and clean energy, one of the major passions that I have, which is SDG number 7, and sustainable cities and communities, that's SDG 11, global partnership. So If we have to talk about inequality, poverty, hunger, natural disasters, these are the goals that speak to this global challenge we have to understand in those contexts. Then the second one is the global challenges for the society. So we have global challenges for the economy, and these goals that I've talked about, they are the ones that expressively, comprehensively talk about these challenges. Then there's global challenges for society. These include human rights violations, human trafficking, loss of cultures and language, exclusion of women, minorities and others, hunger, poverty, health crisis and pandemics, discrimination, lack of access to education. These are societal issues now. So what SDGs do, what which are the SDGs address the global challenges to society? One, good health and well-being, which is SDG number 3, quality education, SDG 4, gender equality, SDG 5, clean water and sanitation, SDG 6, peace and justice, SDG 16, zero hunger, of course, no poverty, sustainable cities and communities, and global partnerships. So like I said, some of these, if not most of these, are interrelated. You can't deal with SDG number 1 and not deal with SDG number 6 or SDG number 7. It means you are basically not solving the problem. Or you might think you're solving the problem for one, but creating another problem in another aspect. Okay? The third, global challenges for the biosphere. These challenges include climate change, biodiversity, ecosystem loss, species extinction, sanitation, land soil degradation, marine freshwater pollution, toxic waste and pollutants. What are the goals that address some of these challenges? 1. Life on land, SDG number 16. Life below water, SDG number 14. Clean water and sanitation, 6. Climate action, number 13, SDG number 13. Affordable and clean energy, SDG 7. Sustainable production and consumption, SDG 12. Sustainable cities and communities, SDG 11. Global partnership. So this is now, it gets interesting. So we have the biosphere. And in our understanding, it's like, it's a free world, free air. We can just do whatever we want, pollute the air and all these things. But remember that this gets to affect every other issue which comes, every other issue attached to the biosphere. And these are the things that I've talked about. There will be the biodiversity loss, species extinction, the soil will be degraded, marine water will be polluted, toxic air, and that kind of thing. So we should pay attention to some of these things. So now, the third thing, this should be the third thing that I would want to talk about. There are, what did I want to say? There are, I beg your pardon, SDGs that are supported by international treaties and regimes. Now, this is so much data that I hope I'll be able to offload according to the SDGs that I've mentioned. So each SDG has international treaties and regimes that support the legal requirement for it to be accomplished. Okay, I'll just make mention. So this is goal number 2. We have the 1994 Constitution of the United Nations, or UNFCCC. We have the 2001 International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resource for Food and Agriculture. We have 1997 Agreement establishing the International Fund for Agricultural Development. And all these, there are state parties that have agreed to have these treaties nationalized or domesticated or ratified in their country. So to each of these agreements, I'll make mention some, for example, the 1994 Constitution of the UNFCCC, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, which is FAO now, has 194 parties. 194 parties, meaning 195, not 94, 195 states that have agreed to have this embedded in their legal obligations. The 2001 International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture has 147 countries. The agreement establishing the International Fund for Agriculture Development has 177 countries or parties. Then 2016 Canada EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement has 2 parties. So this is pretty new. I'm sure states are still trying to understand what it is all about and how they can contribute or domesticate. So there's there are only 2 people that have 2 states that or 2 regions that have formulated or agreed to these. That's just like goal number 2. Let's see what goal number 3 has. So goal number 3, which is good health and well-being, has 1, the 1996 Constitution of the World Health Organization, which has 193 state parties. The 1996 International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights has 171 states. The 2000 World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control has 182 countries. The 2019 United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement has 3 parties by default. These are the ones that have agreed to that. The last but not the least, I hope I'll be able to upload some of these materials to the site. Of course, I didn't do in the last. I had technical issues, but I hope I have that resolved. The last one I'll talk about is SDG number 4, which is quality education. Quality education has 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It has 189 countries that have signed up to this, that they're going to domesticate this and make sure that there's no one who's discriminated against, especially the women. The 2006 Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has 182 state parties. 1990 World Declaration on Education for All. There's no mention of how many states have agreed to that treaty or regime. The 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child has 196 parties. The 1990 International Convention on the Protection of All Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Family has 55 parties. And lastly, the 1960 Convention Against Discrimination in Education has 106 parties. So this is just an example. There's so many laws and so many treaties, so many regimes, so many agreements that have been made towards the realization, domestication of sustainable development goals. And come 2030, these are some of the monitoring mechanisms that we are supposed to measure against, if at all we have done well or if we have not done well, because of course we've had disruptions with the COVID issue, which has taken us back a little in progressing towards achieving the sustainable development goals. The 4th issue I wanted to talk about today is interactional international law theory and practice. What is the legitimacy and legality of these SDGs? One of them is sources of international law traditionally include treaty rules binding on states which have adopted them, customary principles accepted by states as laws, including jus cogent norms and general principles from major legal systems, with writings of experts and decisions on courts and tribunals as supplementary sources. So they are interactional in nature. like I said, states have agreed to, so they have to domesticate them, meaning they have to give context to state culture, and state principles, constitution. Above all, the constitution is supposed to give supremacy and see which one can work for the country and which one cannot. The second one is an interaction account of international traces, clarity, non-contradictory constance, congruence, and other criteria, establishing a practice of legality with the law as a purposive international legal enterprise that builds, maintains reciprocity through legal framework and culture. And this was quoted by Elfula, J. Brune, and Estope. In recent decades, international law has faced legality and legitimacy challenges because, these laws sometimes they are confusing to understand. So rules are not supposed to be static. They're supposed to be fluid in nature. They're supposed to be transformative practices. What was there in 1945 cannot still have the same impact today. So when we say rules are supposed to be transformative and transforming practices and constituencies, which are also being interactionally transformed on all levels. The fourth one is international treaty and organizational regimes can evolve interactionally, supporting domestic laws and governance reforms aligned with and contributing to global SDG targets. So they're not supposed to be cast in concrete. Okay. We have the fifth thing that I would like to talk about. This is ILA 2002 New Delhi Declaration of Principles of International Law relating to sustainable development. So in this declaration of principles, the duty of the state is to ensure sustainable use of natural resources, the principle of equity and the eradication of poverty, the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, the principle of precautionary approach to human health, natural resources, and ecosystem, the principle of public participation and access to information and justice, the principle of good governance, the principle of integration and the interrelationship, in particular in relation to human rights and social, economic, and environmental objectives. So these are just a few examples of some of the principles that New Delhi in India has adopted to related to sustainable development goals. The the rest of the information, like I said, I can share recommended resources that you can read further on your own. I will be happy to hear from you. We can talk about sustainable development principles in international courts and tribunals using your country, your states, and just to make sure that we teach each other and know at what pace we are moving when it comes to legal frameworks in sustainable development goals. For this session, that's what I had for you. I thank you for watching and I wish you well. Bye.